AFMC is really known.
That this video will provide ideas
and also make sure
between the office hours. Welcome to this edition of AFMC TV. I'm Robin Ledbetter. Thank you so much for joining us. And today I have with me Miss Sherry Williamson, and she is the Child Welfare Project Coordinator at the Arkansas Commission on Child Abuse, Rape, and Domestic Violence. Thank you so much for joining me, Sherry.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Robin.
So, such an important topic, and I know that you've done a lot of education and conferences and speaking engagements about this very thing. And so I think it's so important for our audience to hear about it. Tell me, what does it mean to be a mandated reporter in Arkansas?
So mandated reporters in Arkansas in the context of child welfare are people who are required by law to make a report to the child abuse hotline when they have a reasonable cause to suspect that a child has been subjected to child maltreatment.
And what do you need to make a report?
The information you need to actually make the report is an allegation of child maltreatment and enough information to locate the child. And that can be, of course, they want as specific information as possible. So if you have address and things like that, but if you don't, where the child goes to school, and that type of identifying information is helpful. But those are the pieces of information that you have to have. You don't have to have the name of the offender, which is something that a lot of people assume. That can be discovered in part of the investigation if necessary.
And there are protective factors for families as well. What are those?
Yes. So when we talk about preventing child abuse and stopping it before it happens, we think about things that are referred to as protective factors. And I'm giving you guys some resources where people can find out more information about those protective factors. The list of protective factors are nurturing and attachment, knowledge of parenting and child and youth development, parental resilience, social connections, concrete support for parents, and social and emotional competence of children. Those things, when we can increase those things for individuals and for families and communities, we can reduce the likelihood that kids will be abused.
So important. And there is a hotline.
Yes.
And how does that work?
So Arkansas has a centralized reporting process through the Child Abuse Hotline. It's located at the state police headquarters here in Central Arkansas, the actual physical hotline. The operators there, if you can imagine how hard the work is that they do, I mean, they really are some of the unsung heroes in the child welfare field because they sit and accept calls all day long about these allegations, and they try to make as good of notes as possible that will then go into a narrative when the case is assigned to an investigative agency. So generally, a report will go into the hotline from, it doesn't have to be a mandated reporter. Anybody can make a report to the hotline. And then it will either be accepted for investigation or it will be screened out, which means they don't have enough information. Something exciting that we have now in Arkansas that's been kind of, we've been anticipating this for a long time, but it's new. Mandated reporters now have an online portal where they can report online. So that will leave the hotline available for really emergency type cases. So the mandated reporter portal, each mandated reporter goes in and sets up an account that has their information, and I believe it asks for their profession. But on the website, there are some videos that you can watch that will give you information about how to make that report. But that way you can do that sitting at your desk, or you don't have to, if say a teacher wouldn't have to leave their classroom to go and make a phone call to do it. So it's much more user-friendly.
And healthcare professionals play a big role in this. What do you want them to know? How did they play into reporting?
Healthcare professionals play a huge role in reporting. For one thing, with a lot of neglect cases, which most of the cases we deal with are neglect cases, between 2/3 and 3/4 of the cases are neglect cases. And if someone calls the hotline and says, I have a child I'm dealing with who is hungry, that does not paint the same picture as a medical professional with the background that they have to be able to point out physical characteristics that are things that maybe point towards malnourishment of a child or failure to thrive. They can use different terms that make it more clear how you're relating the neglect or the physical characteristics to potential neglect. With regard to physical abuse, a medical professional is more likely to describe bruises and recognize some of these bruises are yellow and green in color, which means they're likely healing, while some are dark gray or brown, which means they're fresh. So it appears that not only has this child potentially been abused, but it's happened more than once.
So we're talking preventive and protective factors.
Yes. And with regard to prevention, medical professionals can do things that a lot of other mandated reporters don't have an opportunity to do. For example, we adopted our children from foster care when they were older. They were 6, 7, and 8 when we met them. So we didn't have a lot of involvement directly with the teacher in front of our child, right? Because their teachers were teaching. But the first time we took them to see their new PCP, we got to see the PCP interact with the kids. We got to see the nurse interact with the kids and to really watch what they were doing. So as medical professionals, you have an opportunity to model good behavior with parents, with how to talk to kids and react to kids and things like that, and what appropriate expectations are. But you also have an opportunity to encourage parents and support parents. I mean, the first time the PCP walked in the room there were 2 adults and a 6, 7, and 8-year-old boys, one of my children was literally standing in the windowsill at the pediatrician's office. One was sitting on the table where he was supposed to be, and one was trying to climb up the corner of the room, literally trying to climb the walls. And their pediatrician walked in and he looked around and he looked at his laptop and I'm sure saw something about, new parents, whatever, and immediately sat down and started talking to the kids and making us comfortable. So medical professionals and healthcare professionals have a huge opportunity that most other mandated reporters don't have.
And parents sometimes have unrealistic expectations for stages of development for kids. So how can healthcare providers help with that?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so one of the things that in talking to people when I go out and do trainings and in talking to parents, it seems to me anecdotally that a lot of parents worry that there's going to be some type of judgment, that they're doing something wrong. So they feel like when they're in front of medical professionals, they really need to be careful about what they say and what they do so that they're not being judged. And I have given them the example of my children with their pediatrician, with the wall climbing and windowsill standing and all of that to try to alleviate those concerns. But one of the things that medical professionals can do is, on a more personal note, share with a parent when a child is doing something that the parent is apologizing and saying, "I'm so sorry, I don't know why this is happening." It means the world to a parent for a medical professional to say, "I remember when my kid was that age," or "my niece or nephew," or somehow relate it that it's not about patients, not about their child. Like, I get it. The same thing happened to me. Or when we experienced that, here's something we tried. So that you're making that personal connection, which is one of the protective factors, or those social connections.
And something useful for people to know about kids that have been subjected to trauma is understanding the different use levels of safety. Mm-hmm. And what are levels of safety? What does that mean?
There are 2 different things that I would definitely want to share about this. One would be, we all have in our brains, the way our brains are set up, three levels of safety that we go to. Okay, so the first one is social connection, and that's taught. Children aren't born understanding social connection or understanding how to do it. They try to attune with their parents. They reach for it, but they don't know what it is. The second is fight or flight, and the third is freeze or collapse. So if you think from your perspective as an adult, when you've had a bad day, what is the first thing you want to do if you're looking for one of your healthy coping skills? And it's generally connect with somebody, maybe a coworker, another family member. You're not going to believe what happened to me today, where you reach out, shoot someone a text, make a phone call. That's social connection, okay? The second one, fight or flight, is generally a little bit more serious. Kids who've experienced trauma never learned social connection, more than likely. So the first thing they do when they're scared or they're angry or they're hurt is not going to be to reach out to someone. It might be to get really angry and try to fight or argue or pick an argument. Or it might be to run. 2 out of 3 of my kids, we couldn't take anywhere for a really long time because when they got scared, they would run. And when we took them anywhere, they thought they were going back into foster care. So they would jump out of the car and take off running. So just understanding that we have to teach these kids how to have that social connection and that they can depend on that and that that is a good, healthy coping skill makes all the difference in the world. The other thing that I wanted to point out that is somewhat related to this are something known as the 3 R's, and Dr. Bruce Perry talks about this in his book, What Happened to You? The 3 R's are regulate, relate, and reason. And if I could go back in a time machine and have somebody teach me one thing that would have been helpful when I became a parent, it is the 3 R's. The first thing you have to do when you have a child who is just out of their mind with worry or anxiety or anger or just completely out of control is help them regulate their emotions. Then you try to relate with them. And that goes back to that social connection, which is the first level of safety and also one of the protective factors to stop child abuse from happening. Then you try to connect with them and relate to them, and then you try to reason with them. So that's something that's really important that relates back to those levels of safety.
And easy to remember, 3 R's. So what resources are out there?
One of my favorite resources is actually the Prevention Resource Guide that's available through the Child Welfare Information Gateway. That website has a lot of good information, not just about child abuse prevention, but about parenting. Most of it is available in more than one language. There are links to specific state resources. You can find a lot of good information. They also have videos and links to different trainings that you can participate in that are really helpful.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier about how healthcare professionals play such a vital role, and they are a constant in these kids' lives in a lot of different ways. So it's important that they understand and see what's happening in these kids' lives. Why is that role important when it comes to identifying abuse and being a support system?
I think it's important because most of us had a childhood where the person who gave birth to us or who participated in raising us was the person we could trust and expect to take care of us. A lot of kids who are abused don't have that, or kids who are neglected don't have that. Even if they have a teacher who feels that type of care for them, they have so many kids that they're dealing with at once. Medical professionals, whether it's a pediatrician's office, the doctor, the nurse, if somebody has to go to the hospital, the school nurse, occupational therapists and physical therapists, speech pathologists, those folks are people who very often get a little bit of one-on-one time with a child. And the trust level is kind of baked in, right, with a kid. They have a general understanding that part of that person's job is to help them. So that is going to be a person who they're going to be much more likely to get comfortable and be able to actually disclose something if there's something to tell.
So important.
So important.
Well, Sherry, thank you so much for talking to me today. Such valuable information. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that our audience will too.
Thank you.
So that's it for this edition of AFMC TV. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.